Another verse today from the Dhammapada. So this verse is taken from the section of defilement. What do we mean by defilement? Well, to defile something is to kind of spoil the purity of it, we could say, the perfection of it. And I think this is very relevant because, according to Buddhism, underneath all our obstructions, you could say, is something very pure. And it's great if we can have confidence in that, because we're talking here about our true nature. Our true nature is free of that spiritual ignorance. It has wisdom, compassion, generosity. That is our true nature. So this verse says, it is easy to see the faults of others, but hard to see our own. People point out the faults of others, but cover their own, as a dishonest gambler hides a losing throw of the dice. I think when I first came across this verse, I found it quite chilling, probably because it felt pretty relevant, really. I think it is very easy to see the faults of others and to be a bit, superior it can be, critical, angry, and we forget that none of us are free of faults. None of us are. So why do we hide our faults? Well, partly I think it's shame, and it has a lot to do with protecting this fragile ego that we have, this image that we're trying to protect. So, of course, we all want to kind of fit in, to be accepted, to be liked, to be loved, to be appreciated. And we're very frightened of that not being the case, deep down. Perhaps we don't think really we are good enough. Perhaps we don't have confidence in that purity that I mentioned. Maybe we think we're essentially bad. And, a lot of Christianity, particularly in the past and particularly Catholicism, has sown seeds, perhaps, that, in a Christian society, we can easily think that we are essentially bad, not essentially pure. And this can, obviously it can be very damaging. We can start off with a very low image of ourselves. But Buddhism is incredibly positive about what we really are. So, in Buddhism, we try to acknowledge, particularly I think through being able to practice the metta bhavana, this practice of loving kindness. And it always starts off, of course, with ourself, loving kindness towards ourself. And that really reinstates a kind of positive feeling towards ourselves. We're not trying to big ourselves up in any way, but it's like we need to have a positive sense of ourselves. Now, you might have heard that Buddhism teaches no self. And we can easily think, if there's, if Buddhism is teaching no self, we've got to get rid of the self. And, deep down, it does have a truth to it. But also, the first truth is that we have to have a robust ego to start with. We have to have a positive ego. And by that I mean really a positive sense of ourself. A balanced sense of ourself. So, if we feel really bad about ourselves, that's not getting rid of the ego at all. In fact, it can be it's another ego game, actually, to feel really bad about ourselves. Maybe we keep ourselves small and it serves us in some way. If we don't think much of ourselves, then we can pretend that we'll never be able to achieve something, so there's no point trying. If we think badly of ourselves, we might let ourselves off the hook if we're unkind, if we're angry. We might just excuse all our faults because, well, we're not any good anyway, and there's an end to it. Well, Buddhism doesn't do that. We do the metta bhavana to strengthen a positive sense of ourselves, because it's only then that we can really examine our faults and give them up. So we've got to know what they are, but we can't know what they are when we're feeling fragile. Otherwise, they'll be like these realizations will be a stick to beat ourselves with, and that wouldn't do any good at all. So yes, it takes time and a lot of kind of tenderness towards ourselves to really look at the darker sides of ourselves, the pain that maybe we've lived with, so that we can acknowledge more and more, both our strengths and our weaknesses. We get a balanced view. We're just like everybody else with strengths and weaknesses. Everybody has them. So, when we are fault finding with others, it's often because what we're seeing in others we don't like in ourselves. That can often be the case, So I don't like people, I tend to not like people that are opinionated. I can be very critical of opinionated people who put themselves out there. But actually, is that me as well? Well, it probably is to some extent. I've got very strong opinions. Nowadays, I try and hold them more lightly. And, I think the great thing for me is that I don't believe in them anymore. They're still there. I still come up with very strong opinions sometimes. But I know that they don't really have any reality. They're almost like a habit. They're like a habit. If I have strong opinions, it kind of keeps me safe somewhere. Well, it doesn't really. And I find lately, I'm much more interested in other people's views, other people's opinions. So I can still say things quite strongly, but I can also listen. I can also hear other people. But it's just really good to acknowledge to myself, yes, Vajraguptā, you have some pretty strong opinions yourself. And look at what happens when somebody opposes them. So, this actually comes back to the body again. If you find yourself having a conversation and somebody doesn't like your opinions or you're not liking them, notice what happens in the body. There's very often somewhere in the body a tightness, a tension. It can be like you're just waiting to say your bit, but often it's just a kind of tightness in the body, a tension in a muscle. Or even, it might be stronger, it might be a resistance. You might feel that resistance. And there's an impulse, isn't there, then, to kind of say your bit. So sometimes I kind of make it a practice. Hold back, Vajraguptā, just keep listening. Or questioning, do I have to express my opinion here? Is that necessary? Do I need to do that? And sometimes it's good to not do it just because you kind of give up a kind of willfulness to put your opinion out there. A kind of assertiveness. You give up a kind of assertiveness. And that can be a really helpful thing to do. So yes, we must be careful that when we're criticising others, it's not saying much more about ourselves. about the fact that we don't want to be blamed. It's quite hard being blamed, isn't it? And often, even if we know there's a reason for someone to blame us, we'll kind of kick back at that. We won't want to know, we won't want to hear. So it's quite good to really acknowledge that, if somebody gives us some feedback and we're not particularly keen on it, at least we can reflect on it. Think about it. Notice when we want to reply straight away and maybe hold back. So as I'm always saying, meditation is about learning. It's a training in our mind and what goes on there. We're wanting to know, to throw the light on more and more of ourself, more and more of how our mind works. And in that way, the more we get to know our mind, the more creatively we will respond to other people and to the world. So that's enough for today, and see you again.